My name is Evel Knievel. I'm a professional daredevil.
My dad did things that nobody else would ever even think of doing. The crowd, the noise, the people. Evel Knievel was everything.
He didn't have a death wish. He had a life wish, man. Wasn't even a wish. He was doing it. It was man on steel with an engine. Let's get it on.
You hope that he made it, but if he crashed, you know, it just gave you that sensibility, like, man, this guy's not joking.
Who else would get busted up and 2 weeks later be back jumping the motorcycle? Who else can you think about that did that?
He's gangster, man.
The guy knew no boundary. He only knew go big or go home. And the dude never went home.
Evel Knievel made a lot of money, and he spent it faster than he made it. I mean, he used to bet my brother's friends $100 they couldn't eat a can of dog food.
Women, cars, booze. That's probably why he wound up broke.
He says, well, I had two choices. I could either rob banks or jump motorcycles.
His signature was color me lucky. And boy, was he lucky, or God was watching out for him. I think it was God and luck.
His friends used to ask him, Evel, why don't you slow down and save some money for the future? And my dad used to say, look, I'm a daredevil. I know what could happen to me.
Was my dad perfect? Hell no. His name was Evel.
I wear a red, white, and blue #1 on my shoulder because I think I'm the best. In my business, you have to think you're the best, you end up dead.
It was all about that ride. How can I get to Nirvana with this thing? You know what I mean?
My favorite jump, because of what's around it and how it happened, is the Caesars jump. That was the beginning of this iconic mythic figure, and he was self-made.
Caesars Palace Hotel and Casino recently opened in Las Vegas, and it had these massive fountains, and it was a big attraction on the Las Vegas Strip.
Caesars Palace was always the greatest place.
When Evel drove by Caesar's Palace and looked up there and seen those fountains, and he looked across and he says, man, I think I can jump that. The way that he did it, you know, he called Caesar's Palace. He built the hype from the inside out.
I think that Evel Knievel had just a God-given talent about how to be the man.
Let's talk about a self-salesman. A guy who says, I am now Evel Knievel, makes calls from a motel.
So I got to looking at this Sarno, and he was so fast I didn't know whether I'd approach him or not. So I went to a payphone, and I called him up, and I said, this is Mr. Frank Quinn. I'm with Life magazine. You know Evel Knievel. He said, Evel Knievel, who the hell's he? I said, he's this guy who's going to jump over your hotel.
Hey, this guy, Evel Knievel's going to jump your fountain. Who? I don't know what you're talking about.
So I waited another day, called him up. I told him my name was Larson. I was with Sports Illustrated. I said, you ever heard of Evel Knievel? He says, Evel Knievel, Evel Knievel. Who is this crazy guy? I said, everybody's calling me up about him. He said, I think we got to deal with him. I don't know.
Out of fiction, sells this guy, and finally the guy goes, well, I don't know who this guy, Evel Knievel is, but get his ass in here.
So I go to the Sarno, knock on his door. He comes running out of his office. He says, kid, where you been? I've been looking for you, he says.
He created that from a story that he created in his head, a setup, a sales pitch, from a phone call in a motel room to the right people. Hey, man, let's talk about American dreams there. What other country can you create that? And he did create that hype, and then went out and did it.
My dad used to say that small imaginations yield small results.
You can't do speed runs. It's a hard setup there. It's a very, very difficult setup because the fountains are in the way and it's hard to get a good line and it's pretty hard to judge it.
There's really only one way to cover that ground, and that was to fly over it.
He didn't go out and try and organize himself around other people's ambition. He made the world organize itself around his ambition.
December 31st, 1967 is the day where what I like to call the crash heard around the world happened.
We all saw the tape. They played it a million times of him cartwheeling, the motorcycle running over him. That was it, man. You were never going to see him again.
I seen that over and over and over again, and man, every time I see it, I go, oh, how would that guy ever get up and jump again?
That was a splat. If you set up a crazy idea, go through with it and make it, it doesn't become such a crazy idea because it's makeable. But when he failed, people go, oh my God, that was impossible. How did he have the nerve? Where the guts to do that? There was no one like him.
It was amazing having seen the footage that Evel Knievel was actually still alive. The crowd was freaking out, and nobody was sure if he lived or died.
I talked to his wife, Linda, and she told me that he was pretty badly hurt, so I got on a plane and went down there.
He crushed his pelvis. It left him with one leg an inch or two shorter than the other. He also broke some ribs. He was knocked out, had a concussion. It was nasty.
They just couldn't get the medicine regulated right for the oxygen to his brain and that, and he was hallucinating, and it was kind of a crazy time to go through.
Evel liked to embellish stories about his life and his career and his accomplishments. He started telling people that he was in a coma. He said he was at 29 days in a coma. Sports Illustrated asked him, like, what was it like being in a coma for 29 days? And he replied, how the fuck should I know? I was in a coma.
He was not in a coma like he used to claim for 20 days or so. In fact, I was down there about the third or fourth day after he jumped, and he wasn't in a coma then.
The fact that he fell and fell so horrendously set people's minds up. And I think a lot of people, subconsciously or consciously, every time they went to see him jump, remembered Caesar's Palace.
My dad jumped Caesars in the red, white, and blue and crashed. And boom, all of a sudden, Evel Knievel was born.
You know, some people play a part. You put the cape on, you take the cape off. To what extent? As soon as he decided he was evil? Yeah, he pretty much stayed evil. He took on that persona. He never really looked back in the rearview mirror to say, am I that other guy? No, I am Evel Knievel.
Evel Knievel is definitely a product of his time. He was born October 17th, 1938 in Butte, Montana, this rough and tumble Wild West type frontier mining town.
He was influenced by the morality and everything else that was going on in Butte then. It was a tough town because it was a drinking town. They were miners, and they were all out for money.
Lots of guys did make their fortunes, but I think it was more the attitude it instilled in everybody that you could come and you could start with nothing and you could make something out of yourself.
Bob Knievel, when he was younger, was kind of a rogue, let's put it that way. He was all over town, raising hell.
I had heard of him. He had a reputation around town. Crazy.
He was a definite bad boy. I mean, he's well known by the Butte police. He was often arrested for shoplifting or reckless driving or speeding his motorcycle around town.
Up and down these hills like nobody else. Everybody, the cars would stop and watch him go up and down the hills.
And he was jailed one time. He was in a cell next to some guy named William Knievel. As the story goes, the guard says, hey, we got awful Knievel in one cell and Evel Knievel in this other cell.
Smart little punk. By then, I was captivated with the gosh darn guy, so I put on some crayon eyebrows and some bright red lipstick and fixed my hair and went up to the store so somebody could see me. And he saw me.
Linda was like this kind of clean-cut, wholesome, all-American girl.
Well, we had a goofball romance. I don't know, you don't call it romance. It was an infatuation with me.
He started working in the mines, and he didn't really like it. You know, it was dangerous work. He thought he wanted to do something more, so he joined the military. He was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. He came back to Butte. He started a semi-pro hockey team that played for a season or two, the hunting guide service, the merchant policeman, as he called himself. He was full of big ideas and tried them all out.
I got to know Bob real well when he became a door knocker, or a merchant policeman, actually, to put it. He had the route on Harrison Avenue, which included the bar that me and my brother owned.
Merchants in Butte, Montana would pay him to kind of keep an eye on their shop at night, and if they didn't pay him, well, I don't know, they might have gotten broken into.
We got knocked over, lost a few dollars, the window got broken, so you basically know who did it.
He used to pull some shady shenanigans when he'd run out of money. They could never prove anything on him, but he confided into me some of the jobs he did.
He broke into banks at night and could crack open the safe. You know, he said, like, you don't, like, fiddle with the dial with a stethoscope. You just wail on it with a bat.
He told me, he goes, you know, you want sweat in your boots, try robbing a goddamn federal bank. He had to sweat in his boots. He had to do something to get off. Had to do something to make him feel alive. Civilization was a mundane bitch for a lot of people. It sure was for Evel.
When my dad started, he was ditching the cops here. He was robbing a bank or two, or the city hall, or a sporting goods shop.
He was a good burglar, you know, and he knew which places to hit that had the stuff that was easy to steal and easy to carry.
We were standing out in the yard, and he had robbed someplace, and I'm standing there with this money in my hands, and what drives in but the cops? I just freeze, you know. I'm not like him. And he grabs the money out of my hand and shoves it in the washing machine and talks to the cops, and I don't even know what they said because I was in shock again. I didn't really like him doing it, but, you know, we gotta eat.
The trailer we grew up in was right next to my great-grandmother's, great-grandfather's, and wasn't even a double wide. It was almost a double wide. But me and my brother had a bedroom, my sister had a bedroom, my mom and dad had a bedroom. And that trailer was small, but it was home.
As much as he loved Butte, Montana, he wanted to find a way to get out of town, to get on to bigger and better things.
We were living down in Orange, California. He had gone down there to race motorcycles.
Why did he go to L.A.? He thought he was a better rider than he really was. But it didn't work that way. He found out he wasn't the best.
He started the Honda shop in Moses Lake, Washington, and he did really good at that.
Well, he tried to sell me half his motorcycle shop one time for the paltry sum of $2,500 because he was behind in his taxes and they were going to shut him down. But I almost did it. But I got to thinking that I knew who'd be doing all the work and who'd be spending all the money. So I backed out.
He was thinking of what he could do to help promote his business, and his idea was to jump a Honda bike over a box containing 2 mountain lions and a bunch of rattlesnakes.
Moses Lake was his first jump, and him and I built a track out edge of town, and he did the jump there. He had jumped over a couple of mountain lions and a box of rattlesnakes, and it wasn't very far. I mean, probably 50 feet maybe.
Bobby fell short on his landing, hit the edge of the box that the snakes were in, busted it open, and the snakes went free. And the crowd freaked out, but Evel realized, like, wow, I'm onto something here.
And then he started the stunt show. He wanted to show the whole world that he was the best.
When my dad started jumping, because he started jumping was probably 26, 27, and then started his show in 1966.
All of a sudden, he just got a light bulb go off in his head and said, I know what I'm gonna do.
I told him he'd starve to death doing that. You know, he'd never make it. But he fooled me.
He was destined to be a star of some kind. Now, can you imagine being a kid growing up in Butte, Montana, riding a motorcycle around, stealing hubcaps and doing the things that he was doing that he's ever going to become a big star? How can you do that? You know, he's not playing rock and roll, not playing music. You know, he comes up with this thing. And if he's going to do it, he's going to do it better than anybody else.
He couldn't stand for anybody to beat him at anything. He had to be the top dog. If he wasn't the top dog, he wasn't happy.
He did whatever it took. He did whatever was necessary. He did something, and then he observed and figured out how people liked it and figured out a different way to do it so they'd like it more, or whatever the hell he did.
My dad was out racing, you know, breaking bones, and he paid all his own hospitalization.
At this little show that he had put on, there was one fella that jumped the motorcycle, but for some reason he had got hurt, so Bob thought he would let the motorcycle go under his legs. He got hit right in the groin, and he was knocked out for quite a while.
There was nothing mundane about anything to do with my dad, nothing.
You know, when you jump in a bucket of rattlesnakes and bobcats, it's one thing that's kind of carny, but then it turned into quite a large spectacle, you know, and it was more than just the county fair. He was the first guy to do it on two wheels, really. I mean, no one had seen it before, and he gave you your money's worth.
And my dad did everything. I mean, he put up his own ramps, drove his truck from town to town, made the deals with the promoter, made the jump, packed up his ramps.
It was always an event if Evel was going to jump.
Boy, living life on the road, it can be pretty hard. And you just pack a bag and grab a motorcycle, put it on the back, and go jump and hope some people show up.
I was happy that he finally found something that he loved to get up to. You know, he'd had so many different jobs before that, changing jobs about every 3 months for 5 years, that this was the one job that he says, I love getting up and going to work now. Of course he loved the thrill of excitement. He was not the kind of man that wanted to have a 9-to-5 job. He would not do that. He didn't even want to sit home, watch TV and be like the ordinary guy. He liked to be out where the action was. He didn't want to be an ordinary man.
First off, I mean, this guy was super hot. I mean, if I looked anything like him, I wouldn't want to sit around in my small town in middle America either. I'd think that there's, you know, a world to capture.
Evel Knievel was kind of like a Johnny Appleseed. He traveled and touched so many people in so many different regions that had no idea where he came from and no idea how he got there.
My dad was on the road all the time. When I look back at it, though, the good thing about my dad is that he dragged us around with him. I mean, he dragged us everywhere. He dragged us to Florida. We were on the road. We were in California. I've been to every state except for, I think, 2 states I haven't been to. And most of those states I've been to because of my dad.
The guy knew no boundary. He only knew go big or go home. And the dude never went home.
I'm thinking like of American history, like badasses through American history. He was number 1 on the list. You know, they don't take no mess from nobody. And to take it a step further, American badass, you know, someone who loves their country, goes down the road that they carved out themselves.
He started like a lot of great bands have started. You get on the road and you go play your music. You know, you don't wait for the record deal. You go around and take your music to the people. You take your show to the people, and then people start talking. In the next towns, a few more people are anticipating you showing up. Next town after that, people were telling their kids, well, what are we doing Friday night? No, we're not going to the movies. We're going to see this guy, Evel Knievel. Got to see this, man. You heard about him? Look at this pamphlet. He's going to jump what? God, dog. You know? And it just by word of mouth. And then TV caught up with him, or he caught up with TV.
He'd watch ABC Wide World of Sports, which was the biggest national show, and he knew that J.C. Agajanian promoted national championship events from Ascot Park. He had a master plan, and his plan was to go national. So he called my dad. Aggie, my name is Evel Knievel. And my dad said, okay, what's an Evel Knievel? What is that? Well, no, that's me. I jump motorcycles. Well, what do you mean jump motorcycles? No one had done it before. That jumping motorcycles was novel. So Knievel comes in and sits down across from JC, and my father says, well, how do I know what I'm going to pay you? He said, I'll tell you what. Give me a couple bucks a head over what you had last year. Then you'll know that they came to see me, that I'm the reason that they're here. And so my dad, being the good Armenian businessman that he was, said, well, that makes sense. That's fine. Let's do it. Wide World of Sports was coming out on a Sunday afternoon to shoot the event.
Have you ever done 15 before, Evel?
Bill, I never have.
missed a jump up in the northwestern part of the United States over 13, and I was hospitalized and laid up for nearly 5 months, and I sure hope that doesn't happen today.
Every time there was something about Evel Knievel on Wide World of Sports, we would all talk about it in school. Evel Knievel, go watch that tonight. Oh, yeah, there was no cable back then. You know, you only had your big stations, and here it comes.
What he did and the jumps that he made, most people would think you're crazy. Yeah, you're worried. You were scared all the time. You would talk to him. You tell him, you know, you're nuts. It's too long. You know, you're not gonna make it one of these times.
Here he goes. And he makes it. A beautiful leap as Evel Knievel gets the roar of approval from the crowd.
It was a beautiful day. The grandstands were full, and Evel comes out and does a beautiful jump, and it was the first time this was seen nationwide. My dad calls down to the office, and my brother Kerry Agajanian, you know the deal we have with Knievel, right? He says, yeah, Dad. How'd we do? Well, we did real well, Dad, and we owe him about $2,300. This is some years ago, so that was a good figure. My dad said, okay, great, Kerry, put $3,000 in an envelope and bring it up to the press box for me. Cash. Evel comes in, sits down across the desk from my dad, and he reaches into his pocket and tosses an envelope full of money over to Evel. Evel takes it, counts the money, puts it back in the envelope, closes it, throws it back across the desk at my dad. That's not right. The money, it's not right. And my dad looks back at him and says, how do you know it's not right? You haven't looked at my books yet. You don't know how many people were there. You don't know how much money you're supposed to get. How do you look me in the face, throw that envelope back across? He was getting hot now. He was upset. Throw that envelope back across. He thought he'd done him a favor. And tell me that it's not right. And Evel looks at him and says, listen, JC, I had my people at every gate. They had those little clickers. I know how many people you had. I know how many you had last year. And I know how many you had this year. And you've overpaid me. Well, JC sat back and smiled and said, well, I have to tell you something, Evel. When I do well, everyone that works with me does well. When I make money, the people that help me put on my promotion make money. And I did very well. And I wanted to pay you more than we had agreed upon because I thought that was fair. Now, Evel sits back and smiles and said, you're the first promoter that's ever done that with me. And you know something else, JC? Your word is as good as gold. And I'm never going to forget that, and I want to jump for you exclusively.
Butte was a place where your word meant everything, and it was a handshake. I mean, I don't even remember meeting any lawyers when I was growing up in my dad's business. My dad did everything himself, and he told somebody he was going to do something, and he did it.
It was a wonderful relationship that started with two guys that didn't know each other and ended up them being very, very close friends.
In kicking off the brand, you always have to have something, and that's what Evel chose my dad for. So it was, symbiotic. He helped him get the national publicity and international publicity. But then Evel did it from then on. I mean, using Evel Knievel's name, I mean, it was a no-brainer.
He was always thinking. He'd get up in the morning just panting and get huffing and puffing. Linda! Okay, take this letter, you know. I was taking letters, writing contracts, you know, while we were driving along.
He had to create stunts. He had to create the charisma and everything that he was trying to do. Try to add things every time. That's what you got to do being a stunt guy.
You know, he wore black and yellow leathers, and then he decided to go red, white, and blue and take the black off and be like Elvis.
As much of show and glitz that he had, you know, with the outfits and this, that, and the other, you know, which was great, there was still an element of realness there, especially in this day and age. And so many people are faking it.
He was a full package, doing stunts that no one had ever done before. He was doing it, you know, and he came with the packaging, and he came with the show, and he wanted the bright lights. He had the ultimate tease. You got to have a couple of run-bys. Man, he's gonna do it, he's gonna do it, he's gonna do it. This is, well, things weren't just right there you go. It's the great tease, and people still do it today, but I think he, in some way, created that in American consciousness, that give him the tease, that he was such a great showman.
he came out of the mountains of Butte, Montana in his star-spangled suit and offered people a simple truth to watch. He says, I'm going to go from one place to another place over a bunch of stuff, whether it's cars or rattlesnakes. Come and watch, because I'm going to risk my life and limb to do it. And everybody was thirsty for that kind of thing during those times.
When I came back from Vietnam, America was kind of split in half. We didn't get the big parades. We didn't get anything. All we got was spit on. And, you know, we serve our country. And seeing a guy like Evel Knievel wearing the red, white, and blue and doing what he wanted to do and being free meant a lot to me.
He came along at a time when there were no black and white answers to anything. No black and white answers. We were in the Vietnam War. The role of women in society was changing. Everything was wishy-washy, gray, no easy answers.
The country was in a certain place, and I think my dad was one of the first people to really throw off this father figure of the government taking care of you, and really being his own man and really an individual, and that's where the country was, and I think they were ready for my dad to do that.
It was a perfect storm, which happens in history where different cultures come together.
Counterculture was really kicking into high gear with like the whole peace and love hippie movement, and the 60s kind of symbolically ended with the Rolling Stones' free concert at the Altamont Motor Speedway. The Hells Angels were put in charge of security. They wound up beating up a bunch of hippies. They stabbed one guy to death. So now the Hells Angels came over to see Evel's show at the Cow Palace 6 weeks later.
My dad wasn't a biker. He was Evel Knievel. I mean, when you think of Evel Knievel, you think of somebody. You don't think of somebody part of something else. You think of an individual person. I mean, he was Evel Knievel.
That's the one night all hell broke loose with Hell's Angels. I was standing pretty much in the middle of the arena, and Evel's making his practice runs, and I hear the announcer say, and this guy was half in the bag, okay? He said, if Evel Knievel makes his jump tonight, he'll set the Hells Angels back 100 years. I'm thinking, I don't know if that's a good thing to say, because I can see the Hells Angels in the crowd. You say something like that, then you're going to get a reaction.
He made the jump and he was on his way back, and one of them stood up and threw a tire iron at him.
He actually threw a wrench. Of course, that's what everybody carries with them to an event, right? A wrench in your back pocket. But he threw a wrench, missed Evel.
It pissed off Evel. After he made the jump, he rode his bike right up to the guy that threw it, and the guy was giving him the finger.
Evel came back around, and I saw the Hells Angel out there. I thought, what's going on? I thought, I better get over there. So I started moving that direction. Evel throws his bike down. The guy grabs him and just throws him to the concrete. I mean, Evel just was like a rag doll. At the time Evel hit the pavement, I hit this guy. I had about a 30-yard run. This guy never saw me coming. He went out. 2 more jumped out of the arena. It was on. You know, I was ready to take on 2 or 3 guys, but they never got to me.
The crowd just went crazy. Jumped on the Hells Angels and just beat the hell out of them.
And when the Hells Angels tried to attack Evel Knievel, and Evel went after him, the audience jumped in to help Evel Knievel.
My job was to get Evel out of harm's way. So I grabbed Evel, I got him under my wing and took him back to the RV. There was no love lost for the Hells Angels in California. They hauled a lot of Hells Angels to the hospital.
Yeah, it was scary, you know, for a few days there. The Hells Angels they're not around to monkey with, you know, they don't put up with much.
And after the Cow Palace, we went back to the San Francisco hotel that night, and he was afraid. He was afraid that they were going to find out where he was staying. So he asked me if I had a gun. I said, well, I got a gun, but I got it at the apartment. He said, go get it. So I went and got my gun. It was a little .22 Beretta. Couldn't stop anybody. I bring it into the hotel room. Dr. Graham is there, going over him and gave him a shot and
everything. So it's Ray Gunn, the doctor, and me, and Evel in the bed. He said, you bring the gun? I said, yeah, I got the gun. How's this work, he says. I said, just pull back the sleeve and shoot it. He says, like this, and he fired one off into the ceiling. The doctor gets up, he says, see, Evel, I'm out of here. That was Evel Knievel.
Gene and Evel went out to have a couple of drinks, and I stayed at the motel. They came in there. They were both pretty well lit up, drunk, and they started talking like Hell's Angels, you know, and I was asleep, and then I woke up, and these two guys, they got me into bed, and they had me wrapped up in the covers, and we had a 12-gauge shotgun there laying against the wall, and I was trying to reach that thing. I told him, I said, you bastard, you're lucky one of you didn't get shot.
When you're a kid, you don't really understand what it takes to really get famous and make something of yourself and the pace that you have to do it at. This is work. This is a guy getting out on the road and booking himself in every racetrack and carnival he can book himself in.
He was like on a rodeo circuit. Basically, get the caravan together, we're gonna go city to city, man. You just knew there wasn't a safety net. You knew you had a feeling, you had more of a feeling this is not gonna work. He's not gonna pull it off. How the fuck is he gonna pull it off? Well, he didn't have a death wish, he had a life wish, man. Wasn't even a wish, he was doing it. It was man on steel with an engine, let's get it on.
Most of the time he jumped is in pain. His injuries never really healed. Can you imagine being on a motorcycle thinking you might crash again and you're already in pain?
Who else would get busted up and 2 weeks later be back jumping the motorcycle? Who else can you think about that did that?
Get beat, get back up. Get knocked down, get back up. That's an attitude that this guy lived on a daily basis.
You hope that he made it, but if he crashed, you know, it just gave you that sensibility, like, man, this guy's not joking.
He crashed so many times, I know he hurt like hell, but he'd sometimes have the smallest little thing happen to him, and you'd think he was gonna die, you know, so sometimes he was tough, and sometimes he wasn't.
Look at that helmet. If that thing doesn't save my life, I can't believe it. Boy, I hit that wall head on. Jesus, where'd I hit that at?
Look at that line. Over here. Want to get the top? No, I'll be all right. I'm going to jump somewhere.
He had a lot of crashes and he had a lot of operations. So when he was young, though, I mean, it seemed like it went by quick. Seemed like he was injured, seems like he healed up quick. I don't know how quick it was for him. When he made 175 jumps, he only crashed 12 or 13 times.
The jumps he made, and you look at the falls that he had, he should have died a young man.
I think I've probably become immune to pain. I do not have a high pain threshold. However, I've learned to live with pain for so long that I think what would hurt an average person doesn't hurt me so much.
A high threshold for pain, I don't know if such a thing really exists. People throw that around pretty loosely, I think. It's more about, like, what's your character?
I mean, he didn't like the pain. He didn't like the fact he had to endure it, but, I mean, he was resolved to it.
His mantra and his attitude, if he got hurt, that he would come back and finish the act. Come on.
He disregarded pain. I think he even said that to me. So I disregard pain. He didn't want to recognize it. It was a negative factor to him. And he didn't want any negative factors based on what he was trying to go for. His dreams. Pursue your dreams.
You do what I do for a living, you have to have a positive mental attitude. And if that positive mental attitude doesn't work when you make that jump, you have to be man enough to handle the circumstances. In my case, I'm man enough.
I learned the power of one individual's belief in their own abilities to affect their own life.
You have to have that confidence in yourself, what you're doing, what you're about, and what you know you can do and what you know you can achieve. If you don't know what you can pull off, you know, how do you speak confidently and stand there on 2 feet and keep saying yes and yes and yes?
He had sticky notes covering almost every square inch. I can do this jump. I'm number one. All kinds of little notes. I mean, stuck all over the walls. He really did have second thoughts about this one. But Giving credit to the man, what did he do? He sat up there, he overcame his demons, he focused in on what he was going to do. He didn't feel like he was going to make it, but you know what? He did it. He gave it the best shot he had. He looked great. He just didn't make it.
My dad would get a little nervous before a jump, and he would take a hit off some wild turkey just to calm his nerves, maybe 2 sometimes.
I'm Evel Knievel, honey. I'm not supposed to be afraid.
He almost died several times, and the difference between him and most motorcycle jumpers, they'll admit it. When they crashed or crashed that severely, they either never walked again, they never jumped again. He refused to do that. He would crash, heal, do it again, go back to work. To him, it was a job that he loved, and he was an entertainer.
He had a sixth sense about promotion, and he wasn't shy. No way was he shy. He was front and center, and he enjoyed it, and he was good at it.
The first time I really saw him, I was intimidated. And he'd come to town, he was in Madison Square Garden, and I sort of met him, but he was so welled up with being in Madison Square Garden and being evil that I was not on the top of his priority list at the time. I found him to be extremely charismatic, but very much eager to make sure that Evel Knievel was being seen and recognized and paid attention to.
I do remember the first time I saw my father jump was in Madison Square Garden when I was 8 years old, and me and my brother Kelly did an appearance with him where we just rode out on a motorcycle together. And that was our first show. Madison Square Garden was like 11 cars because it's a real small place, but he sold the place out.
Here he is. Let's wish him back.
That's when it sunk in. The crowd, the noise, the people. Evel Knievel was everything.
My dad got so popular that Hollywood started being interested in making movies about him. And of course, this appealed right to my dad.
And there he is now. The man in the white leather suit, ladies and gentlemen, is Evel Knievel, who is going to make this almost impossible jump today.
I made 312 public jumps, and I never crashed until I was paid to crash for Dublin Knievel. On the set of Viva Knievel, that was a whole new experience for Evel. He was now acting. And by the way, he kind of sucked as an actor. He was one of the greatest public speakers when he was Evel out on his own, ad-libbing at the top of the ramp, but he said, "I'm very heartfelt and true." When they gave him dialogue, he sucked.
I mean, he's not an actor. So for him to be fake and someone else, it's like he wasn't that good at it. He thought he was good at it, but we all used to laugh at him a little bit. We thought it was funny.
He and the co-star Lauren Hutton got along terrifically. He was always flirting with her. He was surrounded by a lot of good character actors. The trouble with him being surrounded by a lot of good character actors is they act very well, and that makes him look worse, you know?
I think he thought he was going to get an Academy Award for it.
A lot of guys call themselves Daredevil, and I do too. But man, this guy he was true blood.
It's not a perfect science. Mentally, you had to be different. A tremendous drive. You want to do it. Tremendous drive. I gotta do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna beat those guys.
When Evel started jumping the Harleys, he didn't want to make any changes to them. He wanted to jump it pretty much stock. Everything you got was for real. He could have changed it up, made it a lot easier for him, but he thought he was cheating the audience.
This is a 300-pound motorcycle. To take that thing 80 miles an hour and jump it off of a ramp is, I hate to say ludicrous, but it almost is.
The way that we see it nowadays, the geometry of a bike needs to be a certain way for it to fly through the air, and he didn't have that built into his bike, so you know, a lot of his jumps is front end high, just sailing through the air. And that's an out of control jump when you're front end high.
Oh no. Oh no, no, no. There was no science. He was pure guts.
I don't know how he hung on to that thing on some jumps. It was unbelievable.
We're using, you know, motocross bikes now that have full suspension kits on them. The bikes that Evel Knievel would jump, they didn't have the type of suspension on them that could handle these jumps that he was taking.
He was the first to really do what he was doing. And there's something to be said for that, big time.
Evel Knievel, what he did with those bikes was extraordinary. Nobody even jumped then, not to mention on a bike that was meant for the street. You know, that bike was never meant to be jumped whatsoever. I mean, it had probably this much suspension travel.
The technology that we had in those days, I mean, we had 3 inches of travel on our rear shocks and 5 inches on the front. Today, the motorcycles have 12 and 13 inches front and rear. Besides having that travel, the shocks work.
What I do and what Evel Knievel did, there's no comparison. He was the first daredevil, the daredevil.
Yeah, he started it off. Definitely the pioneer of what happens today. It was just so much more, I don't know, balls and steel.
I mean, you take these kids that jump motorcycles on these computer-designed launch ramps. If you ask them to get on one of these Harleys like Evel used and run 80 miles an hour into a wood plank ramp, try to jump over it, you're not going to get any takers. Those kids won't do that, you know. Evel did stuff that was unbelievable.
You know, I appreciate what I see today, but it feels much more like a video game than when Evel was doing it. It feels like there's a whole lot less gravity than when Evel was doing it.
Nobody jumped a motorcycle like him, a big, heavy V-twin Harley at the distances and the things he did. Nobody did it. He was all about Harley Davidson, and Harley was all American. And it all went together perfect.
The XR has always been woven into the fabric of Harley Davidson. Strength is a second word when you describe that motorcycle, because it has to run short races, long races, rough tracks, smooth tracks. That fit his jumping because it was a high performance. It had to gain speed quickly. He had to hit that ramp at a exact speed. He wanted a motorcycle that was agile and fast. Evel and that bike that worked. He was forever linked with our brand. He was truly a character, and we are a company of characters, and we're very proud of that.
What I loved about Evel is there was no fake to it. He did what he did. No sane human being is going to do it more than once.
Everyone has fears they have to deal with, but who's going to actually step up and get past the fear and say, well, I made the commitment. I said I'm going to do it. Now I have to do it. When you walk the plank, you don't turn around and walk back. You know, when you walk the plank, you jump, for better or worse. Sometimes you find out when you jump off the plank, maybe it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. At least with skateboarding. Jumping motorcycles, that's a different story.
Conquering fear is literally having your 100% of your body and your mindset invested in what you're going to do. Like, there can't be a fraction of you that doesn't believe it.
I never really understood Evel at the level that I needed to understand him until I got on my own bike, got up on my own takeoff ramp, 8 foot high, and looked across the gap to where I was supposed to land on my landing ramp. The biggest thing about jumping ramp to ramp is not how physically fit you are, or how coordinated you are, or how much experience you have when you're in the helmet and you're looking through the visor and you're the guy getting ready to do this. It's all mental.
Time does slow down when you're coming up to the ramp, and you don't necessarily look right at the ramp. You're kind of looking past it. Once you hit the ramp, then time slows down. And when you're in the air, everything is slow motion. But it's like quick at the same time, so it's like slow but fast.
The second I turn at my mark and head towards the ramp, I don't hear anything. There could be 30,000 people screaming at me, and to me it's silent. I just literally know what to do. I tell myself all the time, don't think, just flip. And that's what I do.
RPMs, speed, center line. That's my checklist. And once I get that into my mind, I'm pretty blank. I'm not thinking a lot. You can overthink this thing, you know.
I tried to explain to him what a motorcycle does in the air, and if his front end's down, to rev it in the air and it'll bring it up, and if it comes up too high, tap the brake and let. He blacks out. He doesn't remember any of it. From the time he hits the ramp until he touches down, he doesn't know what happened in the middle.
Even if he was gonna crash, he didn't adjust at all for the crash. He never prepared himself. He always had the same position. Being a daredevil, you're daring yourself to take a risk with the devil.
Risks are one thing. Insanity is another. You've got to take risks or you'll go nowhere.
First of all, when you talk about risking your life, is awfully different than what, say, a quote, normal person thinks that risk is. Some people think betting $5 is a risk. So, I mean, risk is relative.
Evel is the poster child for the American dream, and his name, think about his name. It's the most fantastic name of all time. He was like Captain America, one of a kind, absolutely.
We're right down in there amongst these people, and he says, "Can you believe this? Can you believe this? I never thought this would ever happen." I said, "Well, it has." And I said, "I can believe it, and I don't like it." But he did. He loved it.
As Evel's legend grew and popularity grew, he started making more money from his stunts, from gate receipts and so forth. But what really made him the most money, a couple years later in 1972, the Ideal Toy Corporation licensed Evel's name. They produced all manner of Evel Knievel toys.
Now, you couldn't go down any street in America where you didn't see the kids playing with the toys. Evel Knievel, wind it up and let it go.
I had the wind-up motorcycle. I was actually able to get it to do a lot of the things I saw in the commercial. But that's how much I played with it, is that I had positive results.
These wheels are real exciting and bear my name, Evel Knievel.
T-shirts, posters, jigsaw puzzles, board games, pinball machines.
He started the licensing business. The toys sold hundreds of millions of dollars.
Outsold G.I. Joe one year. Everybody had my dad's wind-up toy.
I mean, these things are the biggest selling toys in history.
He created a character named Evel Knievel and lived it. Living high, living fast, living bigger than life. He just was Evel Knievel.
Come on with me and I'll take you on a little tour of my office and dressing room and show you what you can buy with a few dollars if you're willing to jump a motorcycle over 19 cars. I don't know how many shirts I have here, 200 or 300.
All of a sudden it went to yachts, Ferraris, Learjets. We'd fly back and forth in the Learjets to Fort Lauderdale, to the yachts. You know, from a trailer to all that turns into like, what the heck is this?
Evel had these two planes. I asked him, "Evel, why do you have two jets when you only landed one?" He says, "When I'm flying around, I look out the window and I see that jet next to me. I like to see my name written on the side of it." That's pretty cool.
I was in Butte to do a TV special, an hour special. And he wanted me and my camera crew to come and see his office building that he had built. He was proud they used the rock from the mountains around Butte. Very proud of that. And as we're going over, he said, we gotta hurry. Well, why do we have to hurry? I don't understand. We get there, he opens the door, and against the back wall is a bar. But the most extraordinary thing in the room was a full-sized stainless steel bank vault sitting there. And the reason we had to hurry was because it was on a timer, and he wanted to open it up and show us the inside. So we walk in, and you know those big wheels, and we made it in time. We got about 3 minutes. He opens it up, swings the huge door up, and there in front of us is a full-sized Harley-Davidson gold-plated motorcycle. Now, you couldn't see it all because it was covered in loose cash that had been thrown in like confetti. When later on, when he got in trouble with the government, I wasn't surprised. Unbelievable sight.
He made so much money. I don't think he was a brilliant investor. No one came to Evel and said, "Evel, what should I do with my money?"
I was sitting at a bar with Evel one time, and he says, "You want some wild turkey?" I said, "Well, yeah, that sounds great." So before we know it, we had a couple drinks, and we were doing all this, and I said, "Evel, we've been here an hour." I says, "When are we going to go eat that wild turkey?" He says, "What?" I said, "When are we going to eat that wild turkey?" "We're not eating wild turkey." He says, "That's what you've been drinking, wild turkey." I didn't even know what it was.
As a result of the Caesar's Palace crash, he had the crushed pelvis and one leg was an inch or two shorter than the other. So he required a cane to walk. So he had one, but the cane was also hollowed out.
He found these flasks, these long tubes, and he would stick them in the cane and fill them up with whiskey, and then he'd unscrew the top of the cane and take the flask out and have a drink from it. It was necessary for my dad to buy boats and Ferraris and airplanes and travel and have fame and notoriety. He's living large, and being Evel Knievel was part of all that.
I'm going to have the best clothes, best boots, best diamonds, best cars, trucks, motorcycles, booze, and women on the face of this earth.
Evel Knievel was irresistible to women for several reasons. I mean, for one, the fame and fortune, that's obvious, and he dressed himself in all these snazzy threads, and the way he carried himself and his swagger and his confidence. Women found it sexy that there was this guy that was risking his life.
It must have been tough being that sexy and having, a wife and kids, I know that could get rough.
Well, it's pretty public news that he liked the women. And, when I grew up, it was like, when you get married, you're married for life. But believe me, there was a lot of times when I would have liked to get out of that.
Let's face it, my dad was a good-looking, handsome, aggressive daredevil. For my dad to not be attracted to other women would be like, of course it's going to happen.
Press conferences, he would boast about all the women he slept with. Everybody knew he was married. He didn't give a shit, he was proud of that.
I cannot believe the girls that this guy attracted. It's like a rock star. He was a man, and all these women hanging around. It was crazy. I used to watch it and say, "Are you kidding me?"
My dad walked into a bar in Hollywood, and there was a bunch of celebrities in there. They all wanted to meet Evel Knievel. My dad used to hang out with Sammy Davis Jr. and Phyllis Diller and Flip Wilson. And my dad didn't care if he was hanging out with a truck driver, though, really. My dad just loved to have fun. Sometimes he had it at other people's expense.
He could drink anybody under the table. I've never seen a guy that could put away as much booze as him and not show it.
We'd walk into a bar. We wouldn't be in there in 5 minutes, and it'd be lined up with drinks and bottles and all this. And Evel goes, "Man, he can't go anywhere without people buying him drinks." And he used to take care of people. He used to have a wad of $100 bills. He used to set up there, and he says, "All my people drink till that's gone. When that's gone, you come back and get me."
And he'd take us up to Filthy McNasty's or wherever we'd go. And, I remember him with a bar room full of people throwing a beer bottle over everyone's head and crashing it on the walls, and people are looking around going completely in shock. And then they realize that they're in the presence of greatness. Evel Knievel's in the house.
Women, cars, booze. That's probably why he wound up broke.
He always told me he made $60 million, but he spent 80.
Evel Knievel made a lot of money, and he spent it faster than he made it.
February 18th, 1973, Evel had another big high-profile jump at the LA Memorial Coliseum, which was fitting because Evel called himself the last gladiator in the New Rome, and here he is in the LA Memorial Coliseum. It's a huge venue. It's like 90,000 people. He had been promoting this jump for several weeks in LA, and he caroused nightly at this nightclub called Filthy McNasty's. And the marquee outside said, "Now drunk inside, Evel Knievel." He kind of made a big spectacle, made a big splash in LA. There's a big demolition derby on the floor of the Coliseum, which was sort of the warm-up act for Evel's jump.
Now, demolition derbies were always junk cars, but this was a new car demolition derby. The cars had to be no more than a couple years old. They were Cadillacs, they were Mercedes, they were Lincolns.
Fanciest cars they had at the time, and then they got all the famous Indianapolis drivers to drive these brand new cars, and they had a big demolition derby before my dad jumped.
J.C. and Knievel had bought a Rolls Royce, a white one. And that Rolls Royce was purchased to be in the demolition derby, and it had Evel Knievel on the side of the car, and it had the date of the event. It was really a nice car.
Whenever Evel did something, he did it to excess. It was always going to be over the top.
My dad and J.C. Agajanian came up with this plan. They were going to stack 50 junk cars on top of each other.
All those smashed up cars were stacked into a long, narrow row of cars 2 and 3 deep. And really, it was only about the width of 18 cars he was jumping over.
My dad, he had to build a ski jump ramp because the stadium wasn't big enough. Go down one side of the stadium and up the other side.
He was doing whatever he wanted. He was the boss. There was only one boss all the time, my dad said.
You guys give him one final check over before tonight. We'll be all right. Robbie, what the hell's this? Look at this. You want to get hurt? Why don't you change that? You're not supposed to have a brake lever like that. I want you to get that fixed before tonight. Do you understand? And make sure you wear that helmet. Let's go home. Come on, we got to get some rest.
Comes the time for Evel Knievel, American father, out of the great mountains of the West, to present his boys. And he does it in Toronto at a jump that he's doing prior to the canyon jump.
My dad wanted both Robbie and I to follow in his footsteps. I really wasn't that interested in it, but Robbie was really interested in it. Robbie wanted to be famous, and Robbie was a very skilled motorcycle rider.
When I was 11, I was wheeling across the football field in front of 25,000 people.
Robbie did such a great job, there was just no need for me to perform ever again. My dad was nobody, and in the span of 7 years, he was the most famous person in the United States.
Right on target. I went to Idaho, and I bought a canyon. It's my canyon. And on September the 8th, I'll jump it. And the only way they'll get me out of the air is to shoot me out with an anti-aircraft gun, because I am going to go. Believe me.
In every adversity, there's an equivalency to benefit if you just look for it. The toughest competitor that anyone ever has to face in life is death. I wanted to get on the motorcycle and go against death. I was a life risker.
My dad always wanted to jump the Grand Canyon. He was just a guy that did what he did. He created his own dream, and it was to jump the Grand Canyon.
One of my favorite memories of my dad, I mean, this really tells who he is. He's sitting on the edge of the Grand Canyon on this motorcycle with these fiberglass wings and like 2 propane tanks on it. And there's 2 Navajo chiefs. Now, my dad can't be any more than 28 years old. And he's pointing across to the other side of the canyon, and he's pointing to where he's going to jump to. That's like the most, I love that picture of my dad. My dad had no idea how he was going to get across the canyon. He had no idea what it even took to get across the canyon. He had no idea he had to go contact the National Park Service and the Secretary of the Interior, but he's explaining to anyone who will listen, including these 2 Navajo chiefs, and they're looking at him like, oh my God, this guy's off his rocker.
He originally saw himself as being able to create some kind of a winged motorcycle that would have airlift and fly it over the canyon. I didn't think a whole lot about it. I thought it was pie in the sky stuff. I think most people did.
We took it to an auto show in Chicago. I had to have this thing put together in Chicago in about a week. Well, it was a hurry-up job, but I got the wings on it and mounted the engines, and I just run all of the lines and everything up under the tank and taped them up there. This one guy, he told me, he says, how come all those lines are up there underneath the tank are loose? And I said, I don't know, maybe somebody forgot to hook them up. I said, they'll have it all ready before the canyon jump. And, you know, Evel, he taught me to lie as good as him, you know, so.
I was in Vietnam, and my mom sent me an article, and it's a picture of a guy. He's on a motorcycle, and all you see is the Grand Canyon. And it says, some guy named Evel Knievel wants to jump the Grand Canyon. I go, holy cow, this guy, you know, and that was in the early days. So he had that dream for a long time.
First thing was, it wasn't a motorcycle. He was a motorcycle jumper. And this was another thing. So I was a suspect, and I think everyone in the world was questioning whether it really was something that could be done. And that, of course, was the appeal of it, and he knew that.
I have no idea and how he thought of everything he did. He had the way to promote himself. He had charisma. He had the family jewels, as I should say.
I knew about it. We all knew about it. The man knew how to hype the game. The man knew how to hype the game. He was talking about it. He was fighting people about it, the government about jumping Grand Canyon, and they wouldn't let him. I mean, how long did that go on? 7 years?
My dad used to tell me things, and I would be thinking to myself, oh, bullshit, that's not going to happen. Somehow, my dad would arrange things, and it would happen.
My dream was to jump the Grand Canyon. The Secretary of Interior told me that I could. I took his word for it. Then he changed his mind, so I told him to go get hosed, and I bought my own canyon. A lot of people have said that I couldn't jump a motorcycle a mile across a canyon. But they said that Lindbergh couldn't fly the Atlantic. They said that Shepard and Glenn would never get around the world. And they said that Armstrong wouldn't step on the moon. You know, those people have done what they've done. A person has to be an idiot to think that they couldn't get Evel Knievel a mile across a canyon.
My dad hired a guy named Robert Truax to design his sky cycle that was a chief engineer at NASA. And it led from a bike with wings with jets on it, which never would have worked, to a sky cycle that was 15 feet long. It was a contraption that was going from 0 to 450 in 3.5 seconds. And you're gonna be in that thing. I'm like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking?
I mean, really, he was just flipping a coin. He didn't know whether both test rockets went right in the middle of the canyon.
How would that make you feel? Here this guy's supposed to be one of the top scientists in the world, and the two practice shots, both of them, the thing wiggles and falls into the canyon.
Here's this huge gash in the earth, and here's this little, what looked like a tinker toy on this scaffold. It didn't look like the whole device was really adequate.
It was a rocket ship driven by steam. It's going to go over a huge gaping canyon. It was a lovely, fun, cartoon-like painted coffin, tin coffin.
I think I got to the point where when he was jumping the canyon, I was just pretty well numb and fed up with it all. I know it was so hard on the kids. We figured if he didn't make it, he was going to die that day.
Well, I didn't think I was going to see my dad again.
No, I didn't think it was safe, but I never thought that there was death involved.
I never saw him so apprehensive in my life. He's like, we got to go. I want to get this over with. I'm either going to die or I'm not.
And I think that all of you that are here right now know what this thing is. It's a monster. And I think you all know now by looking at me, I wish that I didn't have to do this and I wasn't here.
The mood out there, I'll never forget it. It was somber. You'd almost swear this guy had a death wish. I almost hate to say that, but it looked extreme. And it was.
He wasn't even more confident than I was. I don't think he thought he'd get across there. But he dug himself such a deep hole, he couldn't get out. He had to do it.
This is what he said he would do. So he's getting into that thing, and he's really putting his life in the hands of, as some people would say, fate.
He really thought he was going to die. But he knew his family was going to be in good hands because he's going to make a lot of money doing it.
He didn't know what was going to happen when they lit that thing off.
When he came out and he got in that rocket, your adrenaline is just pumping, and you have no idea what's going to happen. You know, that's when I started getting sick to my stomach.
3, 2, 1. Whoa, it looks like a good one. Whoa, oh, Evel, stay with the bird.
The next thing you know, the chute's out.
We knew the parachute was not supposed to come out. So when the parachute did come out, I mean, I saw the 2 test rockets go right in the middle of the canyon.
He never reached full acceleration. He made it almost to the other side, but he was jumping against the wind, so after the chute did come out, he started coasting back in and ended up down in the canyon.
Whoa, there's been a mistake. He looks like he's going into the canyon. The ship's going down.
He floated down beyond our view. I mean, I remember looking over the edge of the canyon.
Yes! The family, and we're racing around to them now, is hysterical and then shocked, crying. They think Evel may be dead or maybe drowning in the river.
It's a sheer wall for half a mile down, and it blows the rocket into the side of the canyon 10 feet from the ground, and there's a 20-foot embankment where the rocket can topple over, and my dad can live.
Had he gone into the water, he probably would have drowned because he was unable to get out of the thing by himself.
Evel Knievel is standing in the boat and waving. He is alive and well.
Evel gets accused a lot of pulling the chute early. Evel always claimed that something failed back there and it deployed on its own.
You didn't do a damn thing wrong. The can is still on the thing. It is. Blew off right there on the lawn. Blew off by accident? Yeah, it was our fault.
The chute came out early. Had nothing to do with Evel Knievel. It had to do with the top blew off and pulled the chute out. That's more dangerous than letting it fly.
He had a dead man switch. He had to keep his hand closed. And that was so that if he lost consciousness and went limp, his hand would open and that would spring the switch and it would deploy the chute.
He never pulled that chute. It blew off from the G-force, just like a shotgun shell. Boom, boom.
What I don't believe is that he pulled any switch on purpose. Because what fool would pull a chute while you're accelerating? You got a good chance of burning the whole thing off or ripping it off. Whatever happened, I believe it to be an accident of some sort, no matter whose fault it might have been.
Doesn't really matter, you know, looking back on it, whether it was mechanical failure or whether it was human failure. What difference does it make?
There's just a small percentage of people that think that that might have been a con. I'll tell you what, put them in that rocket. You haven't seen anybody else go since.
Who cares what the critics had to say? I know my dad didn't give a shit what the critics had to say.
If I'd have made it across the canyon, everybody would have said, well, it's easy, I could have done it. If I'd have died, they'd have said, well, the daredevil died. Evel Knievel, that was his grand finale. But excuse me, I didn't. I'm still alive.
That moment made me realize the situations in our life, you know. It just helped me to see things a little differently.
That being the pinnacle, sort of the dream shot, that's not the ideal end of the narrative. That's not the climactic end, you know. It was either make it or crash into the other side. That's the climactic end to Evel's life. Well, neither happened.
Evel kept quiet for several months after Snake River. You know, the American public probably had kind of grown tired of him at that point, so he planned a 10-show UK tour, and the first event would be at Wembley Stadium.
He arrived about 3 weeks before the London jump, and he'd sold 3,000 seats for a 100,000-seat stadium. He had a problem on his hands. And he gets off the plane, and as the legend goes, there's a few members of the press there, and then he makes his first statement. I'm so glad to be here in England, where we came and won the war for you. Oh, really? And they start writing. Little lady from the BBC raises her hand in the back. Mr. Knievel, don't you think that your failure to jump the Snake River Canyon has damaged your credibility? Without a beat, he says, no canyon and no woman I ever jumped ever damaged my credibility. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Who could go to London before Wembley and not have the place even closer sold out, ride around in a car and tell everyone in England that this whole place would be rubble if it wasn't for the Americans? Challenged them, put them down, and got them pissed off. But what did it do? It filled Wembley Arena, didn't it?
I think it might have been the biggest crowd of his career, maybe 70 or 80,000 people. What he planned to jump was 13 London transit buses.
There's a lot of wonder as to whether they're coming there to see him succeed or not succeed. Evel always thought he was going to succeed, except in Wembley. He was concerned about a gearbox being delivered, proper gearbox for his motorcycle. He said, I knew I wouldn't make it. I said, what if you knew you wouldn't make it? Why didn't you take a bus away? So he looks at me like I am the greatest idiot. And he says, I'm the world's greatest daredevil, Doug. Can you imagine turning to 80,000 Englishmen and saying, I'm sorry, I have to take a bus away because my gearbox hasn't arrived from New Jersey? No. He's going to put on a show no matter what the consequences.
When Evel's looking at his ramp, getting ready to go, rolling up his motorcycle, knowing that he has to do it, got 80,000 people out there watching him, you know the guy can't even hardly breathe. You know he wants to get this jump over with so he can breathe again.
He was badly hurt. Broken hip, broken bone, hand broken.
And he broke his back, so I'm sure he was in a lot of pain. So he had enough about his senses to, like, ask the guys to help him up.
And he made everybody pick him up, take him up to the top of the buses, and give a speech to the crowd.
He's like, no. You guys are gonna take me, and you're gonna put me back on that ramp, and I am going to address my audience. He's gangster, man.
The crash wasn't enough. He had to still get back and say something to these people.
Ladies and gentlemen of this wonderful country, I've got to tell you that you are the last people in the world who will ever see me jump, because I will never, ever jump again. I am through.
You wonderful people, this wonderful country.
You are the last people to ever see me jump, because I will
never, ever jump again.
And the crowd was just silent. 70,000 jaws dropped all at once. That's a pretty strong statement to say, I am through.
You have this grand idea of what you're going to go and do, and when it doesn't work out, it's kind of like it spins you a bit. You know, it really starts pulling the stitching that holds the whole thing together.
He wanted to walk out of the stadium. And I think by that time he was beginning to go into shock.
I walked in, I want to walk out.
That day in Wembley Stadium, that was the most dramatic moment of his career.
I went back to New York, started editing. About 2 days in, phone call, 5:30 in the morning. Doug, Evel. Hi, Evel. You can't use that quote. What quote? The one where I said wouldn't jump again. Evel, why? Why? Because I might jump again. He threatens to sue me, the whole television network, and he hangs up. When the show was over the following Saturday, he started getting calls in his hospital room immediately. It was a pretty good show.
He crashes trying to jump over 13 buses, announces he's going to retire. Then he thinks about it for a while and says, I'll be a son of a bitch if I'm going to retire, crashing.
And I'm not going to quit that way. I will try it again. If I make it, I'll continue. And if I don't, I'm going to pack it all in.
And he decides to come back to the United States and jump over 14 buses.
That's probably the longest motorcycle jump he would have attempted in his career.
He had told people on the air that he would never ever jump again. Now he's going to jump again. We want to watch that.
Perversely, I think it was because of the brutal Wembley Stadium crash that so many people wanted to tune in to see if it was going to happen again.
He's not hesitating. He'll go.
And this time he rode back up to the top of the landing ramp and he addressed the audience once again.
But as far as I'm concerned, I have jumped far enough. Today, I'm going to walk away from here with you, and I feel that's being a professional. That's what I'm going to do.
It became the highest rated show in the history of ABC's Wide World of Sports in 37 years of coverage. About 60 million people watched that thing.
Muhammad Ali was huge, but his fight and Frazier were second in the Nielsen ratings.
I think that may be the moment that everybody bought in. Finally, he was getting the exposure. Finally, he was getting the recognition. Finally, he was getting the payday. And by that time, he had been through it all. And that is kind of what happens to folks, unfortunately, is they get that recognition at the time when they're coming to the crescendo of their career.
That was like his last big hairy jump. He did jumps later in his career, but they were all smaller and got a lot less attention. And you know, he had his kind of nest egg from all his ideal toys to live off of. So I think he decided to back off.
I don't believe that he ever wanted to throw in the towel because he loved being Evel Knievel. He loved the lifestyle. He loved the money. He loved doing what he wanted to do.
The biggest fall Evel Knievel ever had was not on a motorcycle. It was on a misjudgment.
Shelley Saltman was a PR guy who Evel hired to promote the Snake River Canyon jump. So Saltman accompanied Evel on his tour around the country, and he turned it into a book called Evel Knievel on Tour.
You know, from my dad's perspective, he's out every night. He's promoting the jump. He could live or die. He's drinking. He's probably shooting his mouth off. This Shelley Saltman that was traveling with him the whole time was writing all this shooting your mouth off stuff down. And then after my dad jumped the canyon, Saltman published a book with, I mean, you know, things you say to your buddies when you've had a few too many cocktails that you don't really mean, or you're just being bravado, or, boy, that pissed my dad off. So my dad beat the hell out of him.
The three main points that Evel was upset with, he said that Saltman said he was took drugs and that he was an alcoholic and that he hated his mother.
So he found the guy on the Fox parking lot one day in L.A. and had a guy hold his arms and broke his arms with a ball bat and says, now write a book about me.
The reason my dad brought one of his Montana buddies with him is this is right after he'd crashed and broke both of his arms. He couldn't swing the baseball bat and hold Saltman down at the same time.
Saltman had to have like steel rods put into his arms.
And I said to him, Evel, what the heck were you thinking about? And he said, look, he wrote stuff in that book about womanizing and other stuff. My daughter Tracy's 13. She's going to junior high school in Butte. What do you think it's like for her to go to school and have people talking about that stuff? As the story goes, when he was going to the judge to plead, and the couple of lawyers were with him and they pleaded not guilty, and he stopped them right there, fired them both, looked at the judge and said, Judge, I did it and I do it again. Do what you will with me.
Charge is hitting the man with a baseball bat, intending to do bodily injury, and I did it.
Evel Knievel grew up in Butte, Montana. And, you know, when somebody does something to you, you stomp your own snakes. And that's what he did.
You publicly slander somebody. That's the lowest thing you can do. And it's the slimiest thing you can do. Did he deserve a baseball bat to his arms? Hell yes, he did.
In my world, all you have is your name and who you are and what you stand for and what you believe in. This guy was an insider to him. This is one of his guys. This is one of his promoters. For him to write that kind of book, that was Evel Knievel's way of handling it.
I did what I did because I felt that after I put my faith and trust and confidence in a human being, that he violated that faith and trust and confidence.
You're a worldwide figure. You need to know how to take the punches. And if you don't like what people are writing about you that's true, change your life. It's simple.
He's a guy out of Butte, Montana, who still may be thinking that frontier justice is justifiable. And it was not, of course.
Evel, due to the beating, was sentenced to 6 months in LA County Jail. He spent about 4.5 months in there and then was set free. You know, I thought Evel Knievel just kind of faded away. I never knew what happened to him. I didn't realize that beating up this guy with a baseball bat was pretty much what killed his career.
He lost his Ideal toy contract. That was his biggest moneymaker. Those toys were the biggest selling toys in history. Really, it was the beginning of a financial tailspin for my dad. And that was probably a lot more rough on my mom.
You know, after you live that life and knowing he's doing what he's doing, you might say, I was kind of like Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind. I really don't give a damn anymore. When I look back and think about the things we went through, I wish I could have had the guts to stand up to him, but I never really knew what to do, and it was like fear just overtook me till I found somebody bigger. Praise God.
When my mom and dad got divorced, I thought it was the best thing for my dad, and I really thought it was the best thing for my mom, and it did turn out to be that way.
I first met Evel. I worked at a bar called Mugs and Jugs, just came back from college. I was playing in a celebrity golf tournament. I mean, I knew the name, but I didn't really, that was about all I knew about him. He had white hair, he seemed older. And I had dinner with him, and a week later, I packed up my stuff and we left for Atlanta, and I never came back.
And here's this young, much, much younger, blonde, and found out she had a real low handicap, and then started setting up scams on golf courses where she'd go over and putt with the ladies, and he'd be over putting with the guys, and he'd pick somebody up and say, you know what, we'll take you on however much you hold, da, 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 da. And hell, I'll tell you what, I'm so confident we're gonna whip your ass. I'll take the ditzy blonde over there on my team.
We were pretty much just hustling golf, I guess, and he knew groups all over the United States.
When he fell in love with Crystal, he had her out golfing at the golf course, you know, and he wanted me to come out. I think he wanted me to meet her. And so when I did, I walked up to her and I said, Crystal. I shook her hand. So glad to meet you. Take over, baby.
She made 38 years, and that's a long time. As a person that was there, I know what she went through. And I did not have kids with them. She had 4 kids, so that even adds a whole new variable.
She sure as hell never tried to change him. And obviously that was the only way it's gonna work with somebody like Evel. You could tell they were buddies, man.
They got married at Caesar's Palace. It was a big spectacle. My dad wore a big fancy blue suit, drove out on a motorcycle. It was really cool.
Today when I rode the motorcycle out of the tunnel and down the walkway, I had the same butterflies I did the day I jumped the fountains. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful day for myself and for Crystal, and I'm very happy.
One of the funniest things, I'm talking, sometimes he'd be on his RV. Driving along, and obviously he's in one of these ranch, he'd go on for 15 minutes, and it's just brilliant stuff. And all of a sudden, just in the middle of it, he goes, God damn it, Crystal, you know better than to walk around here naked when I'm eating pizza. And he just jumps right back in the conversation. You'd never walk around naked when Evel's eating pizza.
Well, thank God my dad met Crystal. I mean, she had the youth and the energy to really keep up with him.
I'm not a weak person. I had no problem saying no, and I stood up for what I thought sometimes, and that didn't always end well. He had a hard time controlling his anger. The doctor attributed it to maybe the numerous concussions that he had. It was a long process, but ultimately, once he was on the right combination of drugs, it completely changed him. He was in much better control of himself. And I think he was proud of that, to be honest with you. I mean, like, that was a really big deal.
That evil turned into a different sort of evil. It turned to a man that was more compassionate, to a man that was that wanted to do people right who he felt he did wrong.
He was a little less self-absorbed as he got older, and he really put a lot more importance on relationships with friends and family.
And then, really, the last 5 years of their life together couldn't have been that easy for Crystal, because my dad was, really sick a lot of the time, but, she stuck by him.
He had a hip replacement, a pelvis reconstruction, a back fusion, a liver transplant. So he had a tremendous amount of health issues as he got older. He had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and he couldn't breathe. And that was really the only thing that truly slowed him down in the end.
I mean, he looked at me one time and he said, I'm gonna die. Is this all there is? You go through your whole life and then this just can't be all there is. There's no way someone can do all the things they do in their life and then they just die.
He got religion right at the end, and I thought he was just putting on a show, but he wasn't. He was serious.
He suddenly started watching The Hour of Power with Reverend Schuler. I'd come home once in a while and he'd have that on, and he said, I really think this guy's genuine. So he called him and he said, I want to come there and I want to get baptized.
And he got up on international TV.
May the Lord bless you with eternal life.
Robert Schuller Sr. got some water and just, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, baptized him. And you could hear a pin drop in that place.
And he was telling me that I ought to be able to see the light, or I should see the light, and go do this and do that. And I said, don't be preaching to me, boy, because you haven't been good all your life.
His last years were a struggle. He was ready to go when he went. I can tell you that.
In the last few years before he died, we had a lot of good talks and a lot of, hey, I love you too, Rob, So that was a good thing.
I was praying he wouldn't go to hell. I know I've forgiven him for it. Sure, I still have flashbacks and I can get angry with him, but now I've been trying to think of all the good things we had together.
And my dad, whenever I would leave or we'd be sitting down at dinner for 3 or 4 years, he'd say, well, this could be our last dinner together, Kelly. I'd say, oh, for crying out loud, I'll see you in 6 months. Or I'd say, okay, then you pay the bill since you're not going to need the money anymore. Or however we'd work it out, right? And he said the same thing to me. He said, stay a couple more days. I'm not going to see you again. I said the same thing I always say. I'll see you in a few months, Dad. And he died a week later.
There was no church in Butte, Montana big enough to hold Evel Knievel's funeral. So they had to have it in the local hockey rink. You know what? It was an Evel Knievel happening.
It was in the Butte Civic Center, which holds 10 or 12,000 people. And it was grand in nature. People that he wanted to speak spoke, and thousands of people came to see him. I think it was exactly the way he would have wanted it.
Matthew McConaughey was there, and the governors were there, and Robert Schuller was the master of ceremonies, so to speak. So the night before the funeral, we had a big fireworks show. I remember Robert Schuller looking at me going, a fireworks show? I think I'll do that at my funeral.
At his funeral, there were a number of magical moments, but the climax of that is an extraordinarily powerful moment. He wrote his own last words. He says, I know I treated people badly. If some of you were hurt, forgive me. Last words, 2 words. I'm sorry.
Evel Knievel wasn't one of my brother's heroes. My brother being my own hero, Evel became one of the guys I looked up to. A lot of times you're pissed off because they don't live up to the romanticized idea of who you thought they were. That's okay. You're getting something from a hero that's gonna make you a little better person. And even if they didn't do it, and they know they didn't do it, but they were just teaching you that, Usually that's because they were hoping you, yourself, could be a little bit better. And actually maybe do a little bit better than them. The message, not the messenger.
I want to go to my own kind of heaven. It's got a canyon there that I can jump across and make safely. It's got a golf course I can shoot par on every day. Buses I can jump easily. It's got draft beer that doesn't make you fat. It's got a lot of beautiful girls, and my wife won't get mad if I go out with any of them. And my kids stay small all our lives. That's kind of a heaven I'd like to go to.